So this training is really focused on calculation and the changes we're going to need to make for the new curriculum, and obviously some opinions about how you can be in control of those changes and make them happen in ways which you think are appropriate. The new curriculum does, as I said, represent a sea change. And why do I say that? Well, there are three ways in which it is very different from the curriculum that went before. It is the case that many of you probably very kindly contributed to the Hamilton survey on the draft curriculum. Did anybody do that? We had about 5,500, or just over 5,500 teachers who very kindly took the time to give their opinions. I fed this information back to DFE, who were extremely interested, and I do think we will see modifications to that draft curriculum as a result of the feedback that the department received. So I think that was definitely an extremely useful exercise. I spent a whole day at DFE going through the surprisingly unanimous views of the 5,600 teachers who bothered to fill in the survey. So thanks very much for that. In that survey, it was apparent how great the change would be. The first sea change is that the new curriculum is a mastery curriculum. By this, I mean that levels are going, so that no longer will we be measuring progress in the same way. The idea that we ascribe levels to work, or indeed to children, is going. What will happen is there will be age-related targets. Now, the only way I can liken the major change that this represents is to say that it's going to be a lot more like the driving test. If you think about the driving test, don't know if anybody like me has had to help their child to learn to drive, young person, child to learn to drive. You'll be the people here who've got white knuckles, yeah? Because it's white knuckling your way around as you say brake. But anyway, if you've had that experience, you'll know that when you come to take the driving test, it makes absolutely no difference whether just when you started learning to drive you were completely a natural, got into the car and were kind of fine, or whether when you started learning to drive you were completely hopeless. Do you see what I mean? The driving test examiner is not the least bit interested in the progress you've made. Doesn't matter whether you were terrible and have made amazing progress, or whether you were actually quite good and it only took a little bit to get you up to scratch. Do you know what I mean? They're not interested in that. They're interested in, do you meet the criteria? Do you look in your mirror? You know, can you do the three-point turn? Can you reverse part? All those things. They're simply interested in, can you make the criteria? That's the type of curriculum we are now going to be looking at. Have children met age-related targets? Doesn't matter where they started, the question is, have they met the age-related targets? So levels are going. We are having a mastery curriculum, which in some ways will be much easier, because it'll be easier for parents without a shadow of a doubt. You'll have age-related targets that will be completely transparent for parents. Many questions immediately spring to mind. How will they monitor schools? How will they monitor teachers? Will certain schools have to get 80% of the children to these age-related targets and other schools have to get 100%? You know, how are they going to do it? One thing I know they will not do is enable schools to cherry-pick the targets. All right, well, we'll go for the shape and space ones, we won't bother about the number. No, we won't be able to do that. So it'll definitely be the case that that will not happen. Other than that, we can't really say. I don't know the answer to the question, nor does anybody at the moment. So we don't know how they'll use this to monitor schools. I don't know how they will measure progress. What I do know is there will be age-related targets, and there will not be levels. That's as much as we know. I love being interrupted. It shows me that you're alive, awake. So if you've got a question, feel free to wave a hand. The second sea change about this curriculum is the fact that, I couldn't remember the order, the fact that actually in the new curriculum it is expected that to a much greater extent we will keep the class together in teaching them maths. Now this has a whole load of implications for differentiation, and there's lots of questions here. The first part of today I'm going to focus on calculation. The second part I'm going to focus on pedagogy and classroom management. Obviously these two things are extremely related, but I will pick up some of the questions about differentiation in the second half. But it's certainly the case that the notion that we teach all the children together to the same curriculum for the same age presents us with some challenges and some questions. So an obvious one is, what about the children for whom these objectives are simply not appropriate? That's an obvious question, isn't it? I will make some suggestions about that, but again, that's a question which we haven't had an answer to yet. But it is a question which I've given a great deal of thought to, and we might, and I expect you have too, and we might have some thoughts. The third way in which the curriculum is a sea change is that this curriculum has a focus on calculation and calculation strategies. So it would be correct to say that it is a much more numerically focused or arithmetic focused curriculum, and that arithmetic is seen as a very important part of the maths that children learn in their primary years. Don't think any of us would ever have really disagreed with that, would we? I think we probably wouldn't, but this focus, the sharpening of the focus, is definitely new. And with that, there comes two things. The DfE has produced something called the maths narrative. And the maths narrative is a document which lays out how the minister was concerned to see calculation taught. And this document highlighted two things. The first was conceptual understanding. And the importance of conceptual understanding in the teaching of calculation. And the second was procedural fluency. And the importance of children being fluent in the procedures, the strategies, the methods that they need to do written and mental calculation. So the focus on calculation is twofold. It is a focus on mental calculation and written calculation. And the stress in the maths narrative is on two things: conceptual understanding and procedural fluency. So you've got those sort of ideas in your head, right? And those obviously have implications for how we look at the curriculum. And what I want to do is to pick up some of this in relation to calculation, and then to talk about the classroom management. So in relation to calculation, the way I like to approach this is by thinking what it is that what marks the difference between the children aged 11 who are really confident in their number. I mean, I'm not going to put a level on it, but if I had to, I'd say I guess they're level 4. But it's not so much the level, it's that they're confident. They're quite happy to have a go at a calculation. They're quite comfy with numbers. What distinguishes those children from the children aged 11 who are really struggling, who are not confident with numbers, who when you ask them to do a calculation get a pain in their stomach? You know, oh, you know what I mean? Now, what is it that distinguishes those two? And what's interesting here is that for the last 18 years, I've taught once a week a class at the local secondary school, which is in a very un-PC way known as the no-hopers, i.e. it is the young people aged 15, 16 who don't look like they're going to make the C grade at the end of their GCSE year. Do you see what I mean? So they're year 11s. It's a voluntary thing. They can come to it or not. It's after school. It's a voluntary class, and it's after school, right? And I've been teaching it for 18 years. And they do come, I'll tell you that right now, and a surprising number get the C. And so the class has a quite unwarranted reputation that if you come, you get the C. I always point out there's something in the middle of those two, which is called hard work, you know. But anyway, the fact is that every year when I look at those 15-year-olds in September, and I do a little bit of assessment with them to see what we're at, every year the things that they are struggling with exactly the same as the things that the 11-year-olds who are struggling haven't got. Do you know, it's exactly the same. There is no difference. And what are these things? They're what I call the 4 pillars of calculation. The first thing that a child has who is confident that a child who is struggling does not have is they have a really good understanding of place value. Though it's interesting this, isn't it? Because I expect many of you remember when you were at college. I mean, I'm practically going back into prehistory if I think about when I was at college. But when I think about when I was at college, you know, place value was stressed by the maths education lecturers. You know, the importance of children understanding how numbers work was completely stressed, wasn't it for you in your training? And then when I got into school, and the first school I taught in was actually called the World's End. It really was. It was down in Fulham at the World's End. I don't know if anybody here comes from Fulham, but, oh, wonderful. And down there, in that school, when I got into school, you know what it's like. They said, oh, forget all that stuff you're taught at college. They know nothing in college, you know, forget all that. This is where you actually learn everything. Well, there's a lot of truth in that, but it's definitely the case that those maths education lecturers all those years ago were right about place value. It is absolutely crucial. Let's just look at some things that you know about teaching place value. If I'm working with year 2s, year 3s, 7, 8-year-olds, and I say to them, I'm going to say a number and you're going to write it down, and I say the number 104, what mistake are children likely to make? What will they write?
1004.
Yeah, 1004, because they'll obviously write 100 and stick a 4 on the end. Now, that is a very common mistake. At year 2, it does not bother me, nor at year 1. I think, well, have a go, and we can talk about that, and it's what I call a good mistake. We can learn from it. In year 3, it bothers me slightly more. I'm going to make sure I'm picking it up. In year 6, it's pretty much a disaster. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, at 15 years old, it is a disaster. So that's one thing. Supposing, and this I do with the 15-year-olds, I ask them to do 3.4 times 10. What answer do you think I get? 3.40. Absolutely. Absolutely. 100% of the 15-year-olds write 3.40. Right, what rule have they learned? Yeah, and I want you to think about that, because the fact of the matter is that we probably teach multiplying by 10 in year 3, really. It's where it sort of really starts hitting us. And so we do multiplying by 10 in year 3, and we start teaching it then. When do we do single place decimals, 1 place decimals? We do them in year 4. So that means that for 1 year, the rule adding a 0 applies. After that, it no longer applies. I have a little rule that I obey. There's not many, but this is one of them. And that is, I never teach something I am going to have to unteach later. Because it will be the one thing they flip and learn. And so, you know, I just don't do it. So I think add a 0 is a dangerous rule. It is misapplied down the line, and it doesn't work except in particular circumstances. Another question that I ask the 15-year-olds, also a very good question at year 6, is write £1 and 5 pence as a decimal. What do you think children write?
1.5.
Yeah, 1.5. Again, and with the 15-year-olds, absolutely all of them. 1.5. What's wrong with that? Now, you know, this is a serious mistake, age 15, a really serious mistake. It guarantees they will not get the C at GCSE, but that's not the point. It also guarantees they will not understand written computation involving decimal numbers, which is money. So it's a really serious mistake. And my final one, which I think is in some ways the most concerning of all, is 0.2 times 0.2. 0.2 times 0.2. What answer do you think I get? 0.4. And what I always do then is I say, okay, that's interesting. Right, what's 2 times 0.2? Oh, 0.4, they say. Oh, I say, that's interesting. Do they both have the same answer? Yes. No problem about that. They don't see that there is any problem. Sums often have the same answer, they tell me. You know? Now, 0.2 times 0.2 being 0.4 demonstrates a really serious misunderstanding of numbers, because I really need children to come to understand that multiplication does not always make numbers bigger. If I multiply two numbers less than 1, the answer is smaller. So it's what I call the cake problem. If I have a cake, suppose I have half a cake, and I say that you can have half of my half. Half of a half. Half times a half. Are you going to get more or less than a half? Less. You don't sound very sure. Think about the cake. Think about the cake here. You're going to get less. So half times a half is less. Multiplication doesn't always make numbers bigger, it sometimes makes them smaller. If I am multiplying two numbers less than 1, the answer will be smaller than either. Knowing that, aged 11 is important. Knowing it age 15 is crucial. And it's something that should have hit us during the primary years, for certain. I'm not saying you would have to do 0.2 times 0.2 necessarily at primary school, but I want children to know that multiplication does not always make numbers bigger. Because that's something about understanding how numbers work. These things are all to do with understanding the wonderful number system we have inherited from the Hindus and the Arabs. It's all about understanding how the numbers work or place value. And without it, you can say for a certainty that it's going to be very, very difficult to achieve any sort of fluency in calculation. The second thing that I think, the second pillar in calculation of my 4 pillars, is that the child who is really confident, aged 11, has a really good bank of number facts at their disposal, of memorized number facts. They have a really good bank of memorized number facts. Now, this is a big issue, isn't it? About this, it's a big issue in all schools. About this time of year, somewhere around September, October, there is usually a little bit of an argument in pretty much every single primary school in England between the year 3 teacher and the year 2 teacher. And I'm usually the year 2 teacher, so I have to say I'm a little bit empathetic with her. But basically what happens is that the year 2 teacher, I don't know, it's normally in the staff room. The year 2 teacher comes in at playtime, she nabs her cup of coffee, you know, get the caffeine, gets some caffeine, stirs it up, about to go back and put out the stuff for after play, you know, and in comes the year 3 teacher. And the year 3 teacher nabs her coffee and she says, I just can't stand it. I mean, they just don't know their number bonds. Well, the year 2 teacher puts down her cup and she says, well, they knew them when they left me. Now, that is true. To be fair, that is true. But it's also true that the year 3 teacher has a point. What's happened between year 2 and year 3, which has meant that both of them are correct? What's happened?
2 months holidays.
So some holidays, and let's be honest about this, no one does any maths after the SATs. So actually, they've had close on 3 months to forget every single number bond, and it's dropped out their heads, hasn't it? So the fact of the matter is that they've forgotten them all. But as I always say to the year 3 teacher, it's like getting back on a bike. It comes back. Now, memorization is a big issue in England. And it's an issue for cultural reasons and not to do with schools. Something you would not understand if your only source of information was the gutter press. But it is the case that it is not teachers' fault that memorisation is a big issue. I know that you read in the papers that teachers don't teach tables. They do. Every school I have ever been to teaches tables. Don't you teach the times tables? Yes. I've never been in a school which doesn't teach their timetables. Don't you also teach their number bonds in year 2? Yes. I've never been in a year 2 class that don't teach their number bonds really hard. The fact of the matter is, this is not because we don't teach them. It's because routine memorisation is no longer a part of daily life. And memory is like any other muscle. Use it or lose it. Now, when I came to school, which is in prehistory, when I went to school, and yes, they did have schools then, when I went to school, I probably knew about 30 prayers and maybe about 20 nursery rhymes, or maybe the other way around. It wasn't because I was holy, it was because everyone did. It was impossible not to. You said them all the time, we said them at the start of lessons, you know, it was just routine. Now children come to school, they have not memorised any of those. Or often, I shouldn't generalise because some have. They are the lucky ones. Nothing to do with religion, they're lucky because they've been exercising their memories. Now, it's not just children. When I talk to the 15-year-olds at the beginning of the year, I say to them, can you give me your mobile number so I can text you the arrangements for everything? And they get out their mobiles. They click them on to give me their number. They don't know their numbers. I say, don't you know your mobile? No, why would we? You know, they just click it on. Like, why would I bother? Now, I want you to think about this. Put up your hand if you could honestly, hand on heart, say that you know more than 3 mobile numbers. Mobile numbers. A few. More than 3. Okay. Right. A lot of people are going to say, I mean, okay, there's a handful of people who think they might. I'm not going to test them, it might be embarrassing. But the fact of the matter is that actually most of us do not learn mobile numbers, do we? I don't. Why not? Because you don't need to. In fact, if I give you my mobile number, it is very unlikely that you will even see it. It will be electronically passed from one to another. The other thing is, again, you know, when I was 15, I used to run home from school. I probably knew 20 phone numbers. Why? Because I had to ring all my friends before my parents got in from work. Of course I knew them. Nowadays, you do not need to do that. Technology has, to a large extent, obviated the need to memorise numbers. It has actually got rid of the need to memorise much at all. That is true. Now, I'm not saying this is not a good thing. What I'm saying is life is different. It is not the same. Children are not memorising as a routine part of daily life, by and large. A few are. And where they are, that will be an advantage. That means that if we are going to get children to memorise facts in school, we're going to have to put a lot more effort in. And furthermore, we're going to have to keep those facts simmering so that they stay taught. Because at the moment, these things do not stay taught. So I will go into year 6 classrooms and I will see them teaching the 3 times table. And I will say, what are you teaching the 3 times table for in year 6? And they'll say, because they don't know it, Ruth. And that will be true. Now, actually, we can't do that. With this new curriculum, we cannot do that. When we've taught something, it has to stay taught. That means it has to stay in their memory. That means we have to go on practicing it. That means we have to do a lot more memorization. Now, this is an interesting one because the private sector has never not done a lot more memorization. And my contention here is that private school kids are not cleverer than state school kids, they are just richer. And so what that means is there is no reason why any child can't memorise these facts if we put sufficient energy into it. And we can't rely on that memory being trained outside school. That's something we've got to take on board. Do you see where I'm coming from? Now, you might be thinking that's all very fine, but when are we going to do this? I'll sort that in a minute, right? We will come back to that. We do not do these things by extending the length of the maths lesson, right? We shall all lose the will to live if we do that. So I'm not suggesting that, but I do have some suggestions. The third thing, the third pillar, which underwrites calculation, is that a child who is confident in number has a really good set of images and models on which they draw when they are doing their calculation. In their head, they have something to see, because maths is an abstract subject. And if you don't have something in your head that you can kind of see when you're doing the calculation, it's hopeless. And what are the most important images and models that we use? Well, you know, I always say the most important image that we give children in primary education is the number line, isn't it? And, you know, it's no good saying, OK, we're going to give children the image of the number line, and then not making sure that this is consistently developed throughout the school. So at the moment, what I see is a lot of inconsistency and furthermore, incoherence. Images and models need to be coherent. That is to say, they have to hang together and make sense. Now, you know, you start in reception with, or even in nursery, with a pegged number line, yes? And when I say a pegged number line, I mean big. You know, not one of these fiddling tiny little things. I mean a big pegged number line, 1 to 20, up, you know, really visible with, I don't know, football shirts or sharks or planets or rockets, something appealing on it. You with me? Yeah. One of those. Now that's really a number track, because actually it's a number track, but that doesn't matter. It actually has the numbers as places in a sequence or line. Yeah? And it's actually more important that reception children know that 5 comes between 4 and 6 than that they can count 5 things. Both are important. But knowing that numbers are a place in a line or series is crucial. And that number track that I put down the carpet, or the rug, do you know what I'm talking about here? You put it down the rug and you have Beanie Babies, don't you? And Mr. Lion is on number 6 and Mr. Tiger's on number 10. How far is Mr. Lion going to hop to get to Mr. Tiger? Yes, all that. All of that business is getting that idea that numbers are a place in a line or sequence on the map. And then in year 1, we introduced the notion of a beaded line. And I mean, this is just fantastic, isn't it? You usually have it on a frame. Do you have these? And year 1, I would say they're completely essential, because now I'm getting the idea that the 1 to 100 line is in tens. And furthermore, that if I've got 24, it looks as if it's missing something, doesn't it? It's such a good image. You can really see that those other 6 look like they need to be over there. And so adding to the next 10 becomes something very visual. And having the beaded line and having the numbers marked in tens is absolutely crucial for the introduction in year 2 of a landmarked line, where I have 10, 20, 30, etc. marked along the line. If children have a mental image of the beaded line, the landmark line will grow naturally out of that. And in year 2, I move between the pair, between the beaded line and the landmarked line. And even in year 3, I sometimes come back to the beaded line because it's a very good image, is it not? So I wouldn't say you abandon it at the infants. It's kind of useful in year 3 as well. Would you not agree? So we've moved from the pegged number line. Having said that, the pegged number line still has its place. And we have a pegged number line up in year 6. And the numbers pegged on it are 0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, yeah? Up to 1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, all the way up to 2. And sometimes I'll give out cards one between two, and I'll say a half, 1 1/2, 1 1/3, 1/4, 1 1/8, 1/8. And I'll say, right, I'd like you to talk to your partner and then put these on the line. Well, you know what children say. So I can't do that. So why not? Well, these are fractions. Well, what are those? Oh, they're decimals. Well, can't you put fractions on? No, not allowed. No. And you know why they think that? Because, you know, we've taught decimals in September and we've taught fractions in January. We never make the slightest connection between the two things, and no more do they. So that, you know, and also we aren't traditionally terribly good at putting fractions on a number line, are we? When I shut my eyes and see a quarter, I see a piece of pie. Do you know what I mean? I don't see a place in a number line. Do you know? Actually seeing that fractions belong on a number line is really important. And you know, I always think we've taught decimals very well with our year 6s, but when I give them those cards, they put 1/8 on 1.8. See what I mean? Bit of a problem there. So it is really important that that pegged number line doesn't vanish. And no more does the beaded line. It's just that we are moving up to a greater level of abstraction with the landmarked line. And if the landmarked line has been well introduced in year 2 and year 3, in year 3 I can start introducing the empty number line, which I use for doing counting up subtraction, or addition, or indeed multiplication and division. And so I'm building up the use of the number line through the school. Does this start to make sense? And having a consistent building up of that image is incredibly important. Now, there's also the number grid. So I'm talking about the 0 to 100 number grid. Do you know what I mean? I hope, this is the nodding bit of the talk. I hope you have this on your walls. Yes, and when I say have it on your walls, I do not mean on the flipping interactive whiteboard. I mean in paper, good old, remember that stuff? Good old-fashioned paper on the wall. Why? Because the interactive whiteboard is not always on, and it's not always on the number grid. So I want it on the wall, and I want the multiples of 10 coloured in red, or blue if you like. I guess if you're Tottenham it's blue. And so, you know, you have them coloured in a colour so that those multiples of 10 stand out. And so then children from the age of year 1, and my year 1s are really good at this, understand perfectly well that 39 is a nearly number. Yeah? 39 is nearly, you're just nowhere near as good as my year 1s. No doubt if you practice, you'll be better. The fact of the matter is they get this concept really clearly from looking day in, day out at the number grid. You know, 59 is nearly 60. Much better. 60, please. So it is really clear. And knowing that 59 is nearly 60 is incredibly important in mental arithmetic. And not only that, but the number grid provides a model for how numbers work. So if you imagine a number grid that has, instead of having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 along the top, same size grid, 10 by 10, but this time it's got 10, 20, 30, 40, ... along the top. What I want you to do is to tell your partner what number on this grid, 10, 20, 30, 40, what number is down in the bottom right-hand corner. Just tell your partner. Some disagreement here, 990,000. No, it is 1,000. How do we know? Because, as you rightly pointed out, and I could see people pointing, 100 is at the end of the first row, 200, 300, 400. So it's going to be 1,000. It's not easy, though. And if I draw a little cross in the middle, and I say that this is 330, what number will be there to the right of it? 330, we're going to go 340. And what number will be before it? 320. How do you know? Because we're counting in? Yeah, very good. And what number will be underneath it? Because we're counting in? Yeah, now that is not obvious and is a really good model for how numbers work. And actually the number grid in all shapes and forms, imagine one that goes 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, again 10 by 10. What number, tell your partner, will be down in the bottom right hand corner now? In the bottom right hand corner, down here. Yeah, very good. Yeah. One at the end of the first row, and down the bottom it'll be 10. You're quite right. It will be, because we're counting in tenths, are we not? So there'll be 1 at the end, and so as we go down, we're counting in ones. And if I draw the grid in the middle again, and I say this is 4.2, what do I know about the number that comes after it horizontally? 4.2, 4.3. And what number will be underneath it? 5.2. Because we're you see, it is a, if I'd made it 0.01, 0.02, 0.03, I have a representation of how numbers work. The grid is a very good model for this. Now, it is the case that we use the number line. We use number grids. We use place value cards, absolutely fantastic. We use the place value grid, equally fantastic. Ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, tenths, hundredths. We use the place value grid. We use money. And money makes a very good model for place value in the infants when it's 10p's and 1p's. It's a much more tricky model for decimals, for the reason that I illustrated when I said, how do teenagers write £1 and 5p? That's because money is a bit of a tricky model. As long as you know that, it's fine. But in the infants, it's outstanding. Why? Because it gives a very good representation of value. You know, if I'm teaching the class and you think, okay, we want to do tens and ones, you know, year 1, year 2, we'll do tens and ones. So I choose a child that I think is going to have a bit of a problem sitting still. Believe me, I'm not usually strapped for choice. And I say, okay, right, Craig, come here. You are going to have this money. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 7 shiny 10p coins, silver ones, and 1, 2, 3 rubbishy brown ones. Pearl, you come here. You're going to have 10, 20, 30, 3 shiny silver coins, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rubbishy brown ones. So she's got 37 and he's got 73. And then I say to the class, who are you going to the shop with? No hesitation. No hesitation. Why? Because they all know that silver money is quite good. Gold money is even better if you can get it, and brown money is rubbish, because it's what mummy gives you to play with. So they know that, and so therefore the fact that 73 has got 7 shiny silver 10s shows them that it is actually worth more, which is a very useful model. So money makes a good model. So it is setting up these images and these models and making sure that they are consistent through the school. The fourth thing that a child who is really numerate, aged 11, has as their fourth pillar is they have a really good ability to double and halve. This isn't just about facts either. It's about being able to double and halve. Now, people always look a little bit askance when I say this. They're all happy with the other pillars. Yes to place value, yes to number facts, yes to images and models. But when I say doubling and halving, they always look a bit askance. But I'll just give you 2 calculations to think about. Supposing you are doing 1 million divided by 8 without writing it. Well, no, actually, you can write it down if you like. 1 million divided by 8. Now, I actually participated in a survey on this, well, it's quite a while ago now. I guess it's about 8 years ago. And what happened was people were stopped in the street and asked if they could do 1 million divided by 8. And they were presented with it in a written form, so it said 1 million divided by 8. A lot of people, the majority, said to the researcher, can I have a piece of paper, please? To which the answer was always yes, because I'd said to the researchers, you must have a board and a piece of paper and a pencil. But I can tell you that if the person asks for a piece of paper, they are going to get it wrong. That's a given. Because if they ask for a piece of paper, what you know for a fact they're going to do is draw a bus stop. And I tell you what, it is impossible to do that calculation like that. It is not a non-starter. Now, you are a very untypical audience. How will you do that? Yes, but this is not typical. This puts you in the top 0.01% of the country, which is why you should be paid more. But the fact of the matter is that actually it is the case that halving is a perfect strategy here. Anything else is rubbish, isn't it? You can do it by halving, it's not that hard. Half of 1,000,000 is 500,000, half of 500,000 is 250,000, half of 250,000 is 125,000. I've done it. And it isn't that hard as a halving, but it's almost impossible any other way. The other one that I'd like you to think about is 13 divided by 5. Now, once again, bus stop, no use. 13 divided by 5. Just tell your partner how you might do that in your head.
I would say 13 divided by 10 and then
So what's interesting here is that everybody's agreed that they're going to use division by 10. I think that's a universal agreement. Remember that what we've got to understand here is that 13 divided by 5 is the same, gives the same answer as 26 divided by 10. Now that is a key piece of information. 13 divided by 5, gives the same answer as 26 divided by 10. And I need to know that. I need to know that if I double the thing you're dividing into, and I double the divisor, it makes the answer's going to be the same. And some people will do it in a different order. They will divide 13 by 10, then double it. Some people will double it, then divide by 10. But the point is that halving and doubling is crucial here, as is understanding the relation between numbers. And the thing about doubling and halving, which puts it as my fourth pillar, is that doubling and halving is all about the relationships between numbers. And scaling, for example, understanding scaling, scaling up, scaling down, is all about doubling and halving. We actually only really scale in two ways, double or halve, or to a factor of 10. Those are the only sorts of scaling which really matter to us. And so that, again, it's really important that children have a good understanding of doubling and halving and a good knowledge of their doubles and halves. Now, those four pillars are, to me, they are the basis on which calculation has to be built. So now let's think about what we need in order to do that. And it will be borne in on you by now that actually in maths, we are not teaching one subject. We are teaching two subjects. We are teaching mental maths and written maths. And I used to think that if I taught written maths really very well, then the kids would sort of automatically learn mental maths. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't work. It isn't true. Actually, they are different. The reason why it doesn't work is because we use wholly different strategies. So let's just do 3 calculations. And I'd just like you to do these with your partner. I'm not interested in the answers. I'm interested in how you do them mentally. And what I want you to tell your partner is how you will do these calculations mentally. So we'll do 55 subtract 7. We'll do 55 subtract 47. And we'll do 155 subtract 99. Off you go. Tell your partner how you'll do them. So interestingly, I could hear certain words, but before we discuss your strategies, I'd like you to vote here, and this is like Switzerland, you have to vote, okay, it's compulsory. I want you to vote on which one you thought was the most difficult, and you don't have to agree with your partner. Put up your hand if you thought 55 minus 7 was the most difficult. Put up your hand if you thought 55 minus 47 was the most difficult. Okay, put up your hand if you thought 55 minus 99 was the most difficult. 4 people. What's interesting there is that it indicates, and again, you're not a typical audience. Normally, if you just take people off the street and ask them that, or if at a parent evening, which I do a number of parent evenings every year, at a parent evening, 55 minus 47 will be easily the hardest. I mean, by a massive majority. Teachers are always a bit less predictable, which is good, and a little more sort of, you know, astute about it. But what it does indicate is that the size of the number says very little about the difficulty of the calculation. After all, it is easier to double 21 than to double 17, isn't it? Do you see what I mean? The size of the numbers has very little to do with the difficulty of the calculation. The difficulty of the calculation is almost wholly dependent upon how many stages you have to do it. So, okay, let's look. 155 minus 99 is a kind of interesting one, because one thing I know is that probably half of you probably had a little crisis, a bit like me. And my crisis goes like this. I say 155 subtract 99. Well, 99 is clearly a nearly number, isn't it? That's the first thing I notice about it, yeah? I'm nodding at you. So I take off 100, so that's fine, and then I have a little crisis. Do I add one on or do I take one off, right? Now, if you had that crisis, so do the children. So what I know is that half my class is going to get the answer wrong by 2. So that's good, because in maths, errors are often predictable. And the good thing about that means that I can teach away from the error. So in this instance, I do teach away from the error. I choose a child and I say, Wayne, come here. You've got £155. That's the good news. And the bad news is that you owe me 99. So you have to give me 99. So here's Wayne with his £155. He owes me 99. Well, I take 100. Is that okay? Is it? No. Why? I've taken too much. What have I got to do? Give one back. Exactly. Now that I will be teaching them so that they don't make that little error. And that's kind of key in that. In 55 minus 7, I could hear a lot of people saying, counting back, I don't believe you counted back in ones. No. What did most of you do? Yeah. So let's just look at the prerequisite skills for taking 5 and then taking another 2. You had to know that 7 is 5 and 2. Yeah. Right? Now, when do you learn the story of 7? Reception, absolutely. In reception, we do the story of 6 and the story of 7. And these are really crucial. This is a crucial prerequisite. If I don't know that, it makes this almost impossible. When I was teaching reception, we took it for granted that we had, in every single reception class, little cloth bags that were actually made of felt, but they were little cloth bags. They were completely sealed, and so you had a bag that had, say, 7 wooden beads in it, and it was completely sealed up. And you stitched it down the middle through both bits of cloth, such that you could squeeze a bead just through the gap in the stitching. Does that make sense? So you had a cloth bag with 7 beads in, you could squeeze the bead from one side to another. So sometimes you had 7 and none, and sometimes you had 6 and 1, and sometimes you had 5 and 2. Do you see what I mean? And we had those for all the numbers up to and including 10, little bags. And they were very tactile. And kids used to sit there fiddling with them. But they were very important, because it's really important in reception that I know that 7 is 5 and 2, and 3 and 4, and 6 and 1. I don't want children to have to think about this. I don't want them to have to count on. I want them to know it. And if you don't know it, you can't do that piece of mental arithmetic. What else did you have to know to do this piece of mental arithmetic? You also had to know that 55 subtract 5 is a no-work sum.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to do any work to do 55 subtract 5. And again, that tells me a lot. If I go into a year 3 class and I say 55 subtract 5, and they're going, 55, right, 54, 53, that tells me something. It doesn't tell me anything about how bright the child is. It tells me a lot about how they've been taught. 55 subtract 5 is a no-work calculation because it is not a subtraction, it is place value, isn't it? And if you understand place value, you understand that. I also need to know that the number before 55 is, before 50 is 49. Which is not a trivial piece of knowledge, actually, as anybody who teaches in the infants will tell you. Going backwards over a multiple of 10 is always hard, isn't it? Going backwards over a multiple of 10 is hard in year 6 if you make the multiple big enough. So, I mean, some years ago, 9-year-olds in an international test were asked to do 2003 minus 5. Well, what they did was they all wrote down 2003 minus 5, draw a line. Well, that is going to be a disaster. No wonder they all got it wrong. Because doing that as a decomposition is about the worst way you can do it. And it is not a subtraction, it is a question about place value. The key to getting that question right is knowing the number before 2000. And a lot of children will tell you it's 999. It's a very common error. So that kind of, indicates the difficulty there. 55 subtract 47, I suspect there were quite a variety of strategies. Put up your hand if you used some form of counting on. Okay, so a lot of people, majority. And that would be the way I would teach it. This is not a takeaway. So what this tells me is that if in the infants I have consistently referred to the minus sign as being take away, the poor year 3 teacher has a big problem. Because subtraction a lot of the time, in fact most of the time, is not take away. It is difference. It is about counting from one thing to another. Any form of giving change is in that category. So I need children to be thinking 47, another 3 to 50, yeah, and another 5 to 55. So I need that bridging 10. Some people may know that 7 and 8 is 15. If you know that number fact, that becomes a much easier calculation, doesn't it? So that's another instance where your bank of number facts is going to help you. Now, what these 3 calculations show us, amongst other things, is that they're all subtraction. None of them are very hard. They're all subtraction, and we did each one a different way. When you are doing mental arithmetic, the first thing that you do is read the calculation. You read the calculation to yourself. You say the numbers. You get your head around what the calculation is, like, oh, 99, it's a nearly number. I'll get my head around it. The second thing that I do is I choose a strategy. So when you were doing it together, you first read it, and you secondly chose how to do it. And you did not choose the same method for each of those. You had a different method for each one. And quite commonly when you're doing mental arithmetic, you transform the calculation. So you didn't say 155 subtract 99, you said 155 subtract 100. You adjusted it. You do this all the time if you're shopping. 3 pizzas at £4.99 each. You do not draw a little £4.99 times and you don't do that. You say call it a fiver. You just want to make sure you got enough in your purse, don't you? Don't want to get to the cash desk and lady here hasn't got enough money, can we put a pizza back? You don't want that. So you're making sure you've got enough. So that's all you're doing. We commonly when doing mental arithmetic, adjust the calculation. We transform it. That's very common. Now, if you contrast this with how we do written arithmetic, when we're doing written arithmetic, we do not do these things. The first thing that children do, so if I write down a piece of written arithmetic, I don't know, we'll have 36 plus 29. I would hope that no child ever does 36 plus 29 as a vertical column addition. Because if they do, it's a waste of time. We should be able to add two two-digit numbers, any two two-digit numbers, in our heads without a problem. And that is from year 3 onwards. And indeed, in year 2, we can add any two two-digit numbers without a problem. Totals less than 100. That's kind of been the case ever since I've been teaching, so it's a long time. So I would hope we never do that. But if you do see children doing this, it's very clear what they're doing. They don't read the numbers. They start a procedure. And so they go 9 and 6 is 15 and 3 and 2 is 5. And they don't even realise that that's a ridiculous answer because they never read the numbers in the first place. When you're doing written calculation, you tend to start a procedure. Now, of course, we can teach children to estimate first, and we should, and it's great when we do. But by and large, the impetus on doing written arithmetic is to start a procedure. The second thing that you do when you're doing written arithmetic is you use a given method. You do not choose different methods to fit different numbers. You tend to use a given algorithm. And there are problems with that, as were amply demonstrated by 2003 subtract 5. Because the decomposition algorithm is not a good way to do 2003 subtract 5, is it? You're going to have a lot of errors. And indeed, subtraction illustrates this very well, because subtraction is an operation which calls upon quite a lot of actually quite complex mental strategies. If I take something like, I don't know, 312 subtract 178, nowadays we would probably all teach that the same way. We will teach this by a method horribly known as decomposition, yes? Where we say, 2 take away 8, you can't, yeah? That's a lie, isn't it? So we do start with a lie. 2 take away 8, you jolly well can, and the answer's -6, and you know that because you got an overdraft. So, you know, it is the case that we start by telling them something which is mathematically and in every other way not true. However, we will plod on. 2 take away 8, you can't. So we take a 10 out of here, and we put it in here, and that leaves us with no 10s in here, and we've got 12 in the ones column, yeah? And we can model this with base 10, and I'm sure you do it brilliantly. This algorithm doesn't have a dreadfully good success rate. No, it does not. If I take the 15-year-olds, none of them can do it. None of my 15-year-olds. Now they're in the bottom sets, all right? How many can do it, age 15? About 2/3. 66%, around that, for the country as a whole. Not great, is it? You wouldn't accept that in doctors, would you? 66% can do liver. No, it's not very good. Actually, it's not a very good success rate. It is actually slightly worse than that as well, because there's other factors in there. But anyway, let us not be discouraged. It is the case that 312 minus 178, myself, I was not taught that method because I'm so old. It does depend here whether you were in the state or the private sector, and how old you were and which country you were educated in. It's kind of interesting. But put up your hand if you weren't taught the decomposition method, if you're taught a different method. Okay, so quite a few people, young and old, in the room have been taught. Now, I expect you were taught the method I was taught, which was called borrow a 1, pay it back on the doorstep. Yeah? I mean, it was, yeah.
Sorry.
You borrow a 1. Of course, it's not a 1 and you're not borrowing anything, but never mind. You borrow a 1, you go 8 from 12 is 4, and then you pay it back on the doorstep, and then I have to borrow another 1 here. Now, it worked fine, you know, it was fine. no one had any idea why they did it, but that didn't matter at all. And kind of interesting, because when I was first teaching at the World's End, I used to have to bring home the children's subtractions to mark, year 4, subtractions to mark, and what used to happen was I'd get these exercise books, piles of them to mark, and I had to do the subtractions my way, and then mark them the way that I taught it. Do you see what I mean? So, but in order to get an answer for each one that I knew was correct, I did them all my way first. And then I went back and marked all their work. Do you know, Jeff, has anybody ever had this problem? Anyway, one night I was moaning about this to my husband, who is not a teacher, he's a carpenter. And I said to him, oh, it's such a pain because we don't teach the way I was taught, so I have to do them one way and then mark them another way, and it's really such a pain. And he's like, what are you twittering on about? There's only one way to do subtraction. I'm like, no, there's not. There's loads of ways. He's like, no, there isn't. There's only one. So I'm like, no, really, there isn't. There's lots. So I said to him, well, how would you do it? Look, you know, I thought, make the point. 178. I said, how would you do that? And he said, and I'll tell you what, if I'd have known this, I would never have married him. He said, 2 take away 8 you can't. So it's quite consoling that he begins with the same lie. He said, 2 take away 8 you can't. So 8 take away 2 is 6, and 6 from 10 is 4. I mean, how bizarre is that? And then he said, you pay it back on the doorstep. I said, you never borrowed it. How are you paying it back? Now, that is a truly bizarre algorithm, but he can do it and does it quite well, so, you know, each to his own. The fact of the matter is, there are many other ways that you might do this subtraction. You might do it by saying, I'm not prepared to tell a lie. So let's start with the digit that matters most. The digit that matters most is the hundreds, because if you make a mistake there, you're really going to lose a lot of money. So 300 subtract 100 is 200. Is everybody happy with that? 10 subtract 70 is minus 60. And 2 subtract 8 is minus 6. So I've got 200 subtract 60 subtract 6, right? 140, 134. Answer. Now that's an algorithm known as a negative numbers algorithm, where I'm using the fact that actually you can perfectly well subtract 8 from 2. You just have to go into negative numbers. And there's a school that I know in North Newington, a very, very good school, outstanding in Ofsted, excellent in maths. They teach the algorithm that way. I'm not recommending this, I'm simply saying it is another algorithm. It is equally possible to teach it by counting up. When I was teaching in a summer school this summer, we had 11-year-olds who had not got a level 4, whose maths was really level 2, 3, and we were trying to get them confident in numbers so they could go to secondary school feeling better. And I taught them, as I always do in these circumstances, what I call counting up subtraction, or shopkeeper's addition, or in Hamilton terms, frog, because we use maths frog. And the good thing about maths frog is that maths frog can do any subtraction. It doesn't matter to maths frog how hard it is. Maths frog always hops along the line. Because she's maths frog, she first of all hops to the next 10, 180, and then she hops to the next 100, 200. So 178 to 180, number bonds. So it's a hop of 2. And now she's hopped 180 to 200, that's another 20, and now she can go all the way up to 312, 112. So 112 plus 20 plus 2, 134. Now, frog subtraction, or counting up subtraction, they can all get. Every single one of these 11-year-olds got really good at it, to the point that they could do decimals, you know, and it's a very good algorithm for change, isn't it? £10 and you spend £3.87. Well, out comes Maths Frog. And Maths Frog starts on £3.87. And so she hops 3p to take her to £3.90. And then she hops 10p to take her to £4. And then she hops £6 to take her to the tenner. So she's hopped £6, 13p. a very easy calculation. And using Maths Frog, they could do any subtraction. Towards the end, I was thinking, yeah, you're really good at this. You've all got really confident. You're all really happy. You know, any subtraction, four-figure numbers, you know, 4-digit numbers minus 4-digit numbers, no problem. Out came Maths Frog, not a problem. But then I thought, actually, we do need to know that sometimes you can just count back. You know, sometimes it's not sensible to count up. It might be sensible to count back. So I gave as my example 2,000 minus, I think I said minus 87. I said 2,000 minus 87. I said, you can't do this with Maths Frog. Why? Because it's cruelty to frogs. You know, the RSPCA will be down on us like a ton of bricks. It's too far to hop. And I tried to show them that this is not a sensible one to do by counting on. But I tell you what, they weren't having a bar of it. Not a bar of it. No, it's no problem. They said it's not cruel at all. She actually doesn't have to do many hops. Look, 87. She hops one hop to 100, because we're all rather good now, 13. And now she's at 100, so she hops to 1,000, which is 900. And now she hops to 2,000, which is 1,000. She's only done 3 hops, Ruth. I don't know why you're worrying. It's all right. And it's a very easy addition. Well, it's arguable. The fact of the matter is that counting up subtraction makes a default. And it's a good default because it's a good mental strategy, and extended as a written with jottings, it can help those children who cannot remember the decomposition to get an efficient way of getting a correct answer to a subtraction. So if I'm in year 6 and I have kids who have slipped through the net and cannot use decomposition, I do not reteach decomposition. I figure if they've had 3 years that it's not stuck, let's do something else. And so I have a default method. It is also true that if we teach decomposition well in year 4 with expanded decomposition where we expand the numbers, it can have a good success rate. So I don't wish to suggest that we shouldn't be doing that. It is done on Hamilton. We do it on Abacus. I shall continue to do it when we get the new curriculum. I think it's important. But I think you also need to have an idea of what happens if that's not working. And what happens is we build upon good, solid mental strategies. So coming back to that difference, the fact of the matter is that in written subtraction, we need to be encouraging children to look and see if the method they're using is actually appropriate. So if it's a multiple of 1,000, decomposition is not a great option. There's going to be too many things. If it's actually not a multiple of 1,000, and especially if the units and tens in the number that you're taking away from are bigger, it's easy. You see where I'm coming from? So it makes a lot of difference. So actually, in the written arithmetic, we need to be importing what we used in mental arithmetic, which is conceptual understanding. We need conceptual understanding for both teaching mental and written arithmetic. Otherwise, we are likely to get children who cannot remember what you do next. And that's such a common thing, isn't it? Can't remember what you do next.